So we have Zoom. Zoom's owned by Microsoft, right? Canceling a panel was going to happen on San Francisco, was put on by San Francisco State University. So we have San Francisco State University, this panel being censored by Zoom, by Microsoft, by Big Tech. So here's the title. I'll link this article. Zoom cancels panel featuring Leila Khaled amid protests from pro-Israel groups. Zoom announced that it will deny its services to San Francisco State University today to block an online panel featuring Leila Khaled from happening with its software. Pro-Israel groups, including one partially funded by the Israeli government, are taking credit for the cancellation. So Zoom, of course, Microsoft, Big Tech, backing down to the Israeli government. It's disgusting and huge attack on free speech, and it's censoring this different narrative that obviously the Israeli government does not want to be put out there, and it's disgusting. So this is whose narrative? Exactly. Like I was just saying. Gender, Justice, and Resistance, a conversation with Leila Khaled. And then we have a couple moderators, and then the participants, all right there, supposed to happen earlier today. It's disgusting. So Leila is I'm not sure if she still is, as a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, Khaled was connected to two plane hijackings that took place in 1969 and 1970. So, 50 years ago? And that is supposed some reason for canceling the Zoom panel. It's disgusting. And frankly, that's why there really needs to be some type of other technology that's developed that isn't controlled by a huge, massive corporation like Microsoft, who's not going to stand up for free speech and instead will bow to the pressures of the Israeli government in order to censor this different narrative that they don't want getting out there. It's disgusting. And this panel was sponsored by the university's Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program and the Women and Gender Studies department. Statement from the company to the group reads, Zoom is committed to supporting the open exchange of ideas and conversations. Of course, there's a caveat, right? Subject to certain limitations contained in our terms of service, including those related to user compliance with applicable U.S. export control sanctions and anti-terrorism laws. But I bet you never would get on a Zoom call with any members of the U.S. government or the U.S. State Department and cancel that. Let's say if it was, the terrorist Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Benjamin Netanyahu, John Bolton, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, etc. Well, it's obviously very selective in how they apply their rules and regulations on who they censor, as all big tech is. In light of the speaker's reported affiliation or membership in a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization and the university's inability to confirm otherwise, we determined the meeting is in violation of Zoom's terms of service and told SFSU they may not use Zoom for this particular event. Well, and again, you got to be very careful when you listen to the U.S. government for who they deem a terrorist organization, when in fact, the U.S. government is the biggest purveyor of terrorism in the world, look at the sanctions that they have placed on Venezuela, on Iran, I should say. I've gotten corrected on pronunciation, Iran. Their support of the Saudi-led genocide in Yemen. Their unconditional support of Israel, even though of the Israeli apartheid state and their just horrible, disgusting, inhumane treatment of the Palestinians there, etc., etc. So you don't see Zoom trying to, again, censor anybody that's connected to any of the atrocities that the U.S. government is a part of. And again, her alleged terrorist activities were literally 5 decades ago, okay? The event was protested by a number of right-wing pro-Israel groups, including the Lawfare Project. Yeah, it's disgusting. Sari Makdisi, professor English and Contemporary Literature at UCLA, tweeted, "This is what happens when we subcontract our universities to Zoom. They decide which events are acceptable and which aren't. It's outrageous." Co-sign that completely. "This is a dangerous attack on free speech and academic freedom from big tech. Zoom cannot claim veto power over the content of our nation's classrooms and public events," said Palestine legal director Leila Khaled in a statement. "The threat to democracy is elevated by the fact that Zoom's decision to stamp out discussion of Palestinian freedom comes in response to a systematic repression campaign driven by the Israeli government and its allies." Organizers and individuals connected to the event have been responding to criticism since the event was announced after SFSU President Lynn Mahoney wrote an article declaring that she welcomed diversity but condemned hate. Former political prisoner and scheduled panelist Laura Whitehorn wrote Mahoney a letter about this webinar. Leila Khaled, apologize if I'm butchering her name, is a leader in the movement for the rights of the Palestinian people, the letter reads. She has fought in many ways for the right to return to historic Palestine. She will offer important lessons and information about the history of women's involvement in the working for the rights of Palestinian people under occupation and in exile. I found your acceptance of a narrative that brands her terrorist or a hater to be deeply offensive and in conflict with what I believe an educator should say, teach, and promote. And then further censorship by big tech. Since this post was published, Facebook removed the event page from its site, and YouTube shut down the stream just minutes into the talk. Again, that's why we need to develop some type of platform that big tech won't be able to censor, where they won't bow to the outside pressure of, governments, in this case, Israel, because they don't want to have their dirty laundry aired and won't want a, different narrative shared about what's actually happening there, how the Palestinian people are being treated in such a horrible fashion by the Israeli government. Seems to be the first time Zoom has censored a campus event. This is from Max Blumenthal on Twitter. Big apartheid brothers watching. And then here is Leila herself. Great point. Yeah.
محتلينه بكل الوسائل بما فيها الكفاح المسلح. هذا في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة.
طب هلا ليلى بدي أسألك، إذا بتطولي قاموس إيش معنى كلمة إرهاب؟
أنت وياله رحتوا على حيفا، كل اللي بالسويد واللي بأوروبا واللي بأمريكا واللي بكل العالم بيقدروا يروحوا حيفا. أنا بقدرش أروح، أنا ممنوع أروح. مش بس أنا، في 5 ملايين فلسطيني بيقدروش يرجعوا على فلسطين لأنه إسرائيل ترفض تطبيق قرار الشرعية الدولية. ليش بدنا نسكت على هذا؟ ليه؟ ليش إحنا شو عملنا؟ ليه؟ إحنا شعب شو عملنا؟ إحنا شعب انظلمنا كتير في هالعالم. ليش بعدين إذا أنا قمت عملت أي عمل شو ما كانت طبيعته ينقال عنه لأنه هذا مش من حقنا؟
So that's who Zoom was censoring. It's disgusting, and again, why we need to get big tech out of the business of providing services to these universities when they're infringing on speech, freedom of speech, censorship, censoring these and canceling these counter narratives. And where all these cancel culture warriors, people like Matt Taibbi and others, crickets, nothing from them when this came up. An actual example of cancel culture happening doesn't really fit their narrative, so they're probably not going to talk about it. But it's disgusting. It's disgusting.